This is Guns and Butter.
There's something happening here. Yeah. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there.
We even have Wall Street reporters who gave amazing testimony. John Bussey said he was on the 9th floor of the Wall Street Journal office building. He said, I looked out of the window to see what seemed like perfectly synchronized explosions coming from each floor, one after another, from top to bottom, with a fraction of a second between. The floors blew to pieces, individual floors, one after the other, exploding outward. He said, oh my God, they're going to bring the building down, and they, whoever they are, had set charges. I saw the explosions.
The starting point in science is observation. What you are seeing here is what happened to the North Tower of the World Trade Center, the second of 3 buildings to collapse on 9/11/2001. I use the word collapse, but words can be deceptive. What do you really see happening here? There's a tremendous amount of falling debris, but under the canopy of debris, do you see the rapid sequence of explosive ejections of material? Some of the jets have been clocked at over 100 miles per hour. I will call them explosions because it's hard to find other words that describe what we are seeing here. The explosions are not isolated and few. They are continuous and widespread. They move progressively down the faces of the building, keeping pace with the falling debris. Perhaps you can imagine a natural cause, but I can't. Notice that the explosions are occurring on multiple floors at once, over a wide zone, not in a floor-by-floor sequence that might be explained by pancaking collapse. Notice there are explosions far below the point of collapse. Some are isolated and focused. These are often referred to as squibs and are commonly seen in controlled demolitions. However, this is not a standard controlled demolition. The building is being progressively destroyed from the top down by waves of explosions, creating a huge debris field. The destruction is in waves, not just in one wave. Most obvious is a rapid sequence of explosions near the visible corner of the building. But simultaneously we can see another wave of explosions much further down the face of the building under the canopy of falling debris. Notice that both waves of explosions progress down the face of the building, nearly keeping pace with the falling debris just a few feet away. Slabs of concrete did not fall to the ground and smash to dust. There is almost no concrete in the rubble pile. Notice that the concrete is being forcefully ejected outward from the sides of the building, already pulverized to dust. Notice that embedded in the dust clouds are huge girders and entire sections of steel framing that are being hurled out of the building. The horizontal speed of some of the girders has been clocked at over 70 miles per hour. Some of these girders impale themselves in the sides of neighboring buildings. Some landed as much as 2 football fields away from the base of the tower. What could hurl heavy girders with such force and give them such speed? Some people have suggested that the weight of the tower crushing down on the girders caused them to flex, and they sprung sideways by a spring action. But we are not seeing isolated jumping girders. We are seeing a major fraction of the mass of the building, steel, concrete, office furniture, and the remains of human beings, reduced to small pieces of rubble and fine dust, and being explosively ejected in all directions. Bone fragments are found on the roofs of adjacent buildings. The bones were not crushed in the falling mass, or they would have been trapped in the debris pile. They were pulverized along with everything else and blown out in all directions. The NIST investigators have claimed that the top section of the building above the plane impact point came down like a pile driver, crushing the undamaged lower section of the building all the way to the ground. The top section of the building is, however, noticeably absent. There is nothing above the ring of explosions except for a fountain of debris. Can you see a pile driver? It does not appear that the building is being crushed by anything. The waves of destruction and explosive ejections of material are occurring over a wide zone that continues all the way to the top of what remains of the building. The scientists at NIST did not model the collapse of the towers. Their analysis was gravely flawed in many ways, but the biggest flaw was that the scope of their investigation was artificially limited. They took their analysis only to the point of initiation of collapse, as though all that followed was inevitable and needed no explanation. The scope of their investigation was artificially limited to what might have happened or could have happened to begin the collapse. What they explicitly did not take into account is what actually happened. By limiting their investigation to the natural precursors of collapse, plane damage and the fire, they ruled out from the start any possibility of discovering evidence of planned demolition. In other words, anything that occurred during the collapse itself, such as the evidence you're seeing here, was explicitly scripted out of the investigation. Any analytical model of the collapse, no matter how simple or how sophisticated, is a bad model and bad science if it does not come back full circle to explain the actual observations. What do you see?
.1 KFCF in Fresno, or online at kpfa.org. The time is 1 p.m. Up next, Guns and Butter. Stay with us.
This is Guns and Butter.
There's something happening, yeah. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there.
We even have Wall Street reporters who gave amazing testimony. John Bussey said he was on the 9th floor of the Wall Street Journal office building. He said, I looked out of the window to see what seemed like perfectly synchronized explosions coming from each floor, one after another, from top to bottom, with a fraction of a second between. The floors blew to pieces, individual floors, one after the other, exploding outward. He said, oh my God, they're going to bring the building down, and they, whoever they are, had set charges. I saw the explosions.
I'm Bonnie Faulkner. Today on Guns and Butter, Dr. David Ray Griffin. Today's show, Explosive Testimony, the 9/11 Oral Histories. David Ray Griffin is author of The New Pearl Harbor, Disturbing Questions About the Bush Administration and 9/11, and the 9/11 Commission Report, Omissions and Distortions, in addition to over 25 other books. On August 12, 2005, as a result of a lawsuit brought by the New York Times and several families of 9/11 victims, the New York Court of Appeals ordered the city to release hundreds of oral histories of 9/11 witnesses. These witness testimonies were originally gathered shortly after September 11th on the order of Thomas von Essen, the city fire commissioner, who said he wanted to preserve these accounts before they became reshaped by a collective memory. In these oral histories, firefighters and emergency medical workers recounted their experiences of that day. The New York Fire Department recorded over 500 oral histories, which Mayor Bloomberg's administration then refused to release. David Ray Griffin, welcome.
Good to be with you, Bonnie.
David, you've written several lengthy articles recently regarding the events of September 11th. In your research, is the physical evidence from the collapses of the World Trade Center consistent with the official explanation that they occurred solely because of damage to the buildings caused by the plane impacts combined with the fires that occurred when the jet fuel exploded?
I just read an article this morning that somebody was sending around the internet saying that, how the Bush administration has been repealing all sorts of laws since 9/11. And that they've also repealed the laws of physics. So with the new laws of physics promulgated by the Bush administration, it may be that the collapses were consistent with the laws of physics. But if you accept the old-fashioned laws of physics that have been worked out from Newton through the 20th century, well, no, the collapses completely contradict everything we know.
You have written that shortly after 9/11, the New York Fire Department recorded over 500 oral histories in which firefighters and emergency medical workers recounted their experiences of that day. You also go on to say that Mayor Bloomberg's administration, however, refused to release them, but that then the New York Times, joined by several families of 9/11 victims, filed suit, and after a long process, the New York Court of Appeals ordered the city to release them, which it did in August of 2005. And then the Times, of course, made these oral histories public. I hadn't heard much of anything about these oral histories.
Surprise, surprise. You mean Fox News has not reported them? What a shock.
No, and
you mean NBC News and CBS and ABC have not reported them?
Exactly, and I've been involved in this for years, and I only had the vaguest recollections of their existence. Could you talk about those oral histories?
Yeah, and also I think you have read the 9/11 Commission report. And again, even though they had 571 pages, they didn't have a single sentence to spare to mention these oral histories. And in this case, we know that they had access to them because the city of New York had initially turned down the commission when it requested copies. And then the commission threatened to use its subpoena power, one of the few times it did, and they turned them over. So at least some members of the 9/11 Commission had access to these, and yet nobody saw fit to mention them. And it's no surprise that they didn't, because, of course, you and I and many of our listeners know that the 9/11 Commission was devoted solely to protecting and reinforcing the official story under the guidance of Philip Zelikow, who was essentially a member of the 9/11 Commission. And we could go on and on about that for some time. So this is no surprise. But when you look at these oral histories, you see that they did not want the public to know that these oral histories not only were published now, but were available on a New York Times website. So any citizen can go on and find these and read them for themselves. And in my paper, which anybody can Google by just going on Google explosive testimony, and you'll find my paper on this, and you can just read all the ones that I had listed out. I could read a few of them now if you'd like.